I'll call to order this meeting of the Finance and Labor Relations Subcommittee. Item number 2, disclosure of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof. Seeing none. Item 3, delegations, none scheduled. Item 4, report of the Acting Director of Corporate Services. Carmen?
Thank you, through the chair. This report is really just an information piece relating to the city center budget. So I'm happy to try to answer any questions, but they've outlined the levy that will apply to those businesses in that catchment area. But other than that, I don't have a lot to add to the report.
I see Sean is here. I didn't see him or Rebecca when we started. So if I could get a motion for Sean and Rebecca to make a presentation, all those in favor? Carried. So go ahead, Sean and Rebecca, whenever you're ready.
Hello, everyone. How are we? Good. I think we have a presentation that we had submitted. Would we be able to see that on screen? Thank you.
I guess that'd be a yes.
Magic. Thank you. So my name is Rebecca Scott, and I am the General Manager of the Stratford City BIA. We did have a formal change with the City of Stratford to our name change. We are now the Downtown Stratford BIA, but we're waiting on some final branding and a launch of a website before we sing that from the rooftops. So we still refer to ourselves as the Stratford City Center BIA, so you know who we are. So if I could have the next slide, please. So I'm just going to go through a few highlights of 2021 and a few areas of focus for 2022 before I hand it over to Sean Malvern, our treasurer for the BIA board. So the Stratford City Center BIA consists of about 320 members, 2/3 of which are tourism forward-facing operators. So when I say that, I mean restaurants, retail, and services like spa and hair salons. We're a bit unique in a sense that, yes, in the age of COVID, a lot of BIAs have experienced closures, but we've seen actually a trend in the last 2 years where we've had a lot of new businesses open. So we've had in just 2021, which was down from 2020, surprisingly, but only slightly, we had 23 new businesses open. So these are a few of the faces of some of our new business owners. We're very proud to welcome them in these uncertain times. It takes a lot of risk and bravery, and they have really contributed to making our downtown vibrant comparatively to some other communities. We did have 3 closures and 3 location upgrades, so moving into bigger spaces. I don't want to downplay those who did have to close, and I also don't want to downplay how difficult the last 2 years have been for Main Street business. But I did want to highlight the pride we have in our business sector and those who have joined us this year, in the past year. Next slide, please. So the BIA has different subcommittees, one of which focuses on marketing. And I would think in the last 2 years, especially, again, we're going to mention the pandemic, things we focused on are really marketing and supporting our downtown businesses. We thought it was important to invest in hiring a social media manager. So this has been our first full fiscal year of having a almost full-time social media coordinator. We ran lots of contests, and we really aligned campaigns that we thought aligned with our values, including Green Scene, which was highlighting businesses that used environmentally friendly products and processes, as well as the usual, Valentine's Day, Earth Day, Mother's Day, spotlights on new members and spotlights on other businesses and those that might not have social media or a strong social media marketing tool themselves. We also developed a process for tracking who we've been supporting and marketing, so we know who we've shared and created content for. And we've also started, we don't have TikTok yet, but we do Reels, and we've done a ton of video work and content creation as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so as well, we did a video series called the Stratford 21, rapid fire questions for businesses. It seems people want to know and see the faces of our business owners, especially now. It's great to promote the business and what they offer, but people want to know who these people are. And so this highlighted different businesses, very strategic in ensuring that we picked a business from different streets in our downtown, different sectors, and also we looked at diversity. We wanted a nice, it was a 6-part series. We've done photography as well, and we're preparing for that website and rebrand. We did get through the RFP process, vendor selection. There were some project delays, like many things in 2021. I feel like water uphill was the theme, but we look to launch in early this year. And then there were many member communications. So we do a newsletter, and often we get the information that's coming out, stimulus availability, and resources for our members on an ongoing basis. They probably hear from us too much, but we want to ensure they have all of the information they need. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we usually have that wonderful Victorian Christmas market, and we carry through December with mini markets, but this year, another pivot. Very difficult to plan events when we don't know what's coming from week to week. We were very lucky we squeaked this one in the last week of November. Winter Wonderland was a huge success in terms of drawing families out for a safe outdoor event, and we did see those people trickle into our businesses. We did a scavenger hunt to ensure, to encourage people to get out there. And we also partnered with the United Way to collect funds for the Connection Center, as well as warm clothes with a partnership with Choices for Change. So that number was the number raised for that weekend, but we did continue with the tap station in our local businesses for the month of December. So there was more money raised. Next slide, please. Giving me a little practice for my AGM. I won't take too much longer. We also do focus on beautification or hygiene projects. Aside from being a partner in Al Fresco and the Boardwalk project, we have a focus on public art. And we are trying to align ourselves with policy development on that. We created an artist roster, and we selected an artist that we are looking to work with this year. And then with Al Fresco, we added planter boxes and flowers. And thank you to the City of Stratford for taking the time and labor to put those in place. So there's always a partnership with the city, and we appreciate the efforts, the combined efforts. And the next slide. Another big focus, cycle tourism. Destination Stratford had been working with Perth County. I started a stakeholders group. We meet often to discuss cycle tourism and how to benefit the downtown. Members are on there are from Cycle Stratford, Perth County Tourism, and as well as your own active transportation committee. We have a member from there on there, so we're working, not siloed but together. We also purchased 2 bike repair stations that will be put in place in the spring. And we've just bought more bike rings as well to add to the parking. And prior to doing that, we did an audit of all of the parking in downtown Stratford in our catchment area and created a Google map of every parking opportunity so that we can then strategize with the city where that might be moved or placed in the spring to maximize our bike parking for 2022. And then next. Okay, lots of work behind the scenes on policy development and best practice. So that usually we undergo a lot of research with other Ontario BIAs for best practice before we make decisions. And so we did look at policy review and development on things like HR practices. We reconfigured our committees and our mandates for each committee, and the process of which people can apply to those committees. And we also created a new committee, which is called the Advocacy and Education Subcommittee, where we focus on equity, diversity, inclusion training for board staff and community stakeholders. And we've had responses to Every Child Matters, as well as working together on anything that impacts the downtown that needs advocacy, like writing letters to our MP and our MPP and talking to our city stakeholders. We also are a member of Ontario Business Improvement Area Association, OBIA. We, as a member, we adhere to best practice. We sit in on weekly calls, so we're on the up, and we have our best foot forward in terms of projects and ideas. So much so that we've been so involved with that group that they recommended us, the ED recommended the Stratford BIA to be included in studies with McMaster and Ryerson University. I've been included to speak at different webinars that include this. Ryerson's offered a kind, not only Ontario-wide, but working with business improvement areas outside of the province as well. And then next slide, please. So focus for 2022, I mentioned our fabulous name change, a bit more modern. So we're excited about that. I've touched on the public art and cultural plan development, continued focus on active transportation and green initiatives, support members with resources and marketing, continue to work on best practices and policy and procedure development, working on events, and also mentioning the DAP program where we work with Destination Stratford and RTO4 to give out funds to different community groups to do their projects, and continue to work with the betterment of the community. We also continue to do our work with our city stakeholders. A big project that we're excited for is the My Main Street Accelerator Program with Invest Stratford, where we're hiring an ambassador for the downtown, a connector, to develop a database of what's important to our downtown and then incorporate projects for improvement of that downtown core. And of course, Lights on Stratford, I've got to hand it over to Destination Stratford and Zach Gribble and the team over there for taking this to the next level and amping it up. It's my pun for today. From last year, while we were one of the founding partners, I mean, they ran with it and they've organized everything. I have to give them full credit, but we have sat in as a promotional marketing sponsor, and also we were a monetary sponsor, gold sponsor for Sky Castle. So I think it's the whole, the whole idea that working together, we can do more and create more. So we will continue to look at opportunities for grants and working together and partnerships into this year. With all that said, it's a lot of information. Next slide, I think we're on to the budget presentation, which Sean will handle. This is his forte. And I have to say too, one of the big highlights of 2021 was getting Sean Malvern as our treasurer, because prior to that, we didn't have a treasurer that was as well-versed in finances as Sean. So with that said, I will hand over the podium to Sean.
Thank you, Rebecca. Hopefully everybody can see everything on that budget. I'll try to highlight rather than go through in a lot of detail. I can certainly go into a lot of detail if you'd like. Very interesting year, probably like the budget deliberations that council's going through right now. This is a hard budget for us to put together. A lot of considerations in terms of member needs and things that Rebecca just went through in terms of things we accomplished in 2021 and then things that we're looking at for 2022. As you probably know, there's two components to the budget. There's the revenue line and the expense line. The revenue line that you can see above, really there's only one thing that's kind of controlled and probably the thing that you're going to be looking at the most in terms of improving the budget, which is the tax levy. The tax levy is what is paid by members, or sorry, business owners, I should say, in the downtown core. Interest on accounts, which we can debate what we should be getting on the interest. HST rebate, which is kind of out of our control depending on what we do. Community collaboration is some of the grant money we have coming in, and then Destination Animation Fund, which we are not really dealing with anymore. We were the banker at one point for some of the money coming through. It's now Destination Stratford. And the miscellaneous revenue is like really small things like checks and things like that that get returned. So the big things are the expenses, and I won't go through line by line, but I'll highlight for you the things that kind of are different from last year's budget. I would say that line D200, which is really the staffing costs, have gone up, and they've gone up particularly because last year the staff were moved from contract employees to full-time employees. So there are a whole lot of costs associated with that, including benefits, CPP, and EI. But I've reflected that in the budget. Office operations are pretty much the same. Any racism and diversity training there is a cost against that. They're literally going through and doing this training right now. Insurance, membership, phone. The anticipated levy refund are those businesses that at the beginning, Rebecca was talking about that weren't able to make it in a, when they do, I shouldn't say go bankrupt, but when they cease operations, they get some money back. I have actually increased it by a little bit just because I believe that in the economic climate, we're going to see more of that happening, especially with some of the provincial grant programs. I don't believe necessarily providing all the funding that these guys need. Community engagement is down, particularly because we decided this year not to be doing carriage rides in the core. In the past, it was a pretty major expense. And for a variety of reasons, we're not doing that, not the least of which is COVID and health and safety protocols, as well as some other things. Holiday animation was a winter wonderland that Rebecca referred to. Directory sign maintenance, we have to continue to do that as we rebrand. Those signs are going to have to be rebranded as we go along. Promotion, website, our contribution back to Destination Stratford, beautification, which a couple of those projects that Rebecca was mentioning on the active transportation and some of the art policies. And then we have a fee that we pay back into Destination Animation, which is administered by Destination Stratford. So you can see that our total expense is $320. When I look at the increase to the tax levy year over year, it's about 3%. Believe it or not, I actually haven't increased the total budget by that much. It's only by, I think, $600, just because I shifted where some of the expense was through the course of different programs and things like that. That's my very high highlight of the budget that we're proposing to the council. And certainly both of us can take questions.
Thanks, Sean and Rebecca. Great presentation as usual. Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Clifford.
I will move the staff recommendation, and I appreciate the report. It was well done.
Thank you. Seeing no other hands, all those in favor? Carried. Thanks. Thanks again.
Thanks for
Item
Time. Take care.
Item 4.2, Santa Parade 2021 Special Projects Reserve Fund. Carmen, any introduction to this topic?
Sure. This was a bit of a background report provided to council, and also to address the questions that have been coming up through our budget discussion as to, are there any other reserves out there that we could potentially look at? So this was, we're always looking at that, but this just happened to be one that we had highlighted prior to the budget conversations in the last few weeks. So just to give a bit of and I'd asked Brad Herndon to attend this meeting as well, because he is way more involved in the actual parade itself, just in case you have questions about that. But essentially the gist of this is to say that we have some funds sitting in the special reserve of about $8,400. The last couple of years we have not, added to that or drawn upon that. We've supported the parade internally through our operating budgets. So there's not a huge amount of impact this year. However, this the Kinsman Club has approached the city to receive their annual contribution for the parade. So we're just trying to establish whether, how to best support them in that direction. So one of the when the event was first budgeted by staff, we did look at or we were expecting a shortfall between revenues that we collect from parade floats and sponsorships of $1,000, but that was higher than this year, the actuals, because the sponsorship dollars weren't collected as expected. So really we're just anticipating that we continue to support the parade operationally, but that the financial impact for the 2022 year be partially offset with some of that special reserve fund, and in 2021, and we can look at possibly using some of that funding in future years, or using it to support the event in future years. So the recommendation is that we issue the payment to the Kinsman Club. Instead of for the $2,000 initially budgeted, we're recommending $1,800, because they did receive directly a sponsorship contribution to the club themselves, which does impact our internal costs and revenue tracking. And that the residual deficit of the event be just retained by the city and covered. So we're about $1,000 over our projected operating budget. And then lastly, that we leave the special projects reserve fund balance that's remaining of about $6,600 for the purposes of future parades or other activities relating to that. So I'm happy to answer any questions. And if you have any questions for Brad, please feel free to throw those out as well.
Thanks, Carmen. Councilor Clifford.
Yeah, I was just going to ask on the sponsorship. Is the club that is it the club that arranges the sponsorship, or is it the city of Stratford that goes after sponsors for the Santa Claus parade?
I might ask Brad to jump in on that one, just because he's got a bit more of the history of the event.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Through the chair. So the city of Stratford administers the event from registrations to also creating all of the sponsorship letters. And we've been doing this back, I guess, to when I started in 2006. And the sponsors haven't changed. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There might be 7 sponsors that the Kinsman or the Optimist Club in earlier days would have gone out to seek a donation. We create the letters, provide them to the club, the service club. And this year we provided them to the Kinsman. And it's expected that they would deliver those letters as they would have relationships directly with those donors. And then the funds would come back into the city of Stratford account so that we could create, I guess, a full accounting picture of the event.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything? I have a couple questions, Brad. So it sounds like if the service club is collecting the sponsorship fees, which is, from reading the report, we used to get the revenue from that, and we'd use that to offset the expenses of the parade. It's for some reason, and I'm guessing it's not by your choice, the service club has decided that they'll collect sponsorship money and they'll just add it to their general revenues and also have their hand out for another $1,800 for the service they provide. So I'm not sure how Stratford has, like the taxpayers of Stratford are, as the report says, at the very least being as close to breaking even as possible on providing the parade. Like, I don't know if there's any opportunity for us to sit down with the Optimist Club and say, or maybe you've asked this question, what has happened to the understanding that any sponsorship money that comes in goes into a fund to help offset the cost of the parade? So
I can answer that. I'm not entirely sure why one of the sponsors went directly, or the funds went directly to the Kinsman Club. That said, in Carmen's report, we are recognizing the what was it, $200 that went directly to the Kinsman Club to be deducted from what the service club would like as a donation back. I should say the Kinsman Club and the Optimists previously, they do a fantastic job of helping us put on this parade. We administer it. The day comes, they do a lot of work to marshal the floats, make sure that the parade flows properly. They provide health and safety on the roads, and they also provide insurance on the event. So they certainly earn the donation, I think, that they are requesting back. But with respect to why this particular donation went to them directly this year, I'm not sure. I do know that they collect other sponsorships to help support their club as part of the event. I'm not entirely sure what that amount is, but does that answer your question?
Yep. No,
Okay.
that's fine. Yep. My other question may be to Carmen. The club again is making a request through the grants program for some money for this event in particular, or is it just general request?
Through the chair. So they have applied for a funding request for both the Santa Parade as well as their July 1st celebrations that they have as well. So there are two separate applications for the grants committee to consider when we get to that stage. Again, I'm kind of suggesting that this special reserve money for its intent and purposes was for the parade activities. So there's, I guess, remains a possibility when we get to that conversation that these funds might be aggregated or utilized in lieu of the grant, or instead of the, in place of the grant, or in addition to the grant funding that we have. So I just wanted to throw it out there that, to keep the integrity of the purpose behind it. An alternative, I suppose, could be that the funds are retained for the city costs that are incurred relating to the conducting the event. So there's a couple of ways that reserve fund could support the parade events going forward.
Yes, I would think that just for an example, Public Works sends a couple people with barricades down to the parade route to set them out. That's an expense that's incurred by the city, and I think it is somehow accounted for, because when we're going through the grant process every year, we set aside X amount of dollars to offset some of these things like that. So there is an accounting for every time people go out and work on behalf of the city or as part of the city of Stratford. So the question is, do we want to just transfer that operation to the grants, right? That's what, or for these particular type of items.
Through the chair, we're not really recommending that exactly right now, but absolutely that remains an option for this committee as well as for the grants committee to consider later.
Okay, thank you. Is there any, Graham, Councillor Bunting?
Yeah, more of a comment than really a question as such. I feel we're very fortunate to have the Kinsman Club to do what they do. I can assure you that the cost to the city, if the city was to run it by themselves and nobody but the city, it would be considerably a lot more money than that we're talking about here. So I'd like to congratulate the Kinsman Club for taking these projects on, because I'm not sure who else is going to step up to the plate when it comes to such events. So thanks to the Kinsman. Thank you.
Thanks for schooling me, Councillor Bunting. I'd like to say all the service clubs make substantial contributions to the community. If there's no other questions, I will call the vote on the staff recommendation. All those in favor? Opposed, Betty? That's carried. Sorry, I have to go back to the agenda here. I guess I have a question in relation to that, Carmen. Sorry, it's separate from what we just voted on.
Just a question, Mr. Chair. Was that moved? That recommendation, was it moved?
I thought it was. Madam Clerk, did you get a motion on item 4.2?
Through the chair, I'm just going back through my notes and I do not have a mover at this time. My apologies.
I see Councillor Ritzma has graciously offered that motion. We don't have to vote again. Madam Clerk.
Procedurally, if we could we'll just recall the question on the motion. So we'll have a mover of Councillor Ritzma.
No problem.
By that in a minute.
Okay, all those in favor? That's carried. And Just a question of clarification for the acting director. These special projects reserve funds, are they locked into these particular uses as they're titled here?
Through the chair, that's a great question, actually. Typically, reserves we track them based on their origin or their purpose initially. The short answer is it depends a little bit on the origin of the reserves. Some of the dollars that are contained within the special reserve, so there's the other, I'll call them components of the reserve, could be reallocated based on council direction, but some cannot. Like, for example, the modernization and efficiency was a grant received. So that is got some specific criteria attached to it. But some of the other ones, such as some of the other amounts noted, I can't even find the example, just a second here. Like the cannabis grant, that one's also legislatively provided for the purposes of, costs relating to implementing the new legislation back in the day. So again, it depends. So if there's any specific ones that you'd like staff to look at, we can do that, but.
Okay.
Okay.
Councilor Clifford.
I was going to ask Carmen, like on the cannabis, if the police were helping with that, like could it go towards the police budget? Is there, like, do we have parameters like that with the cannabis, for instance? Because obviously the police are the ones that are doing most of the work. So I'm curious about all of them. Like I talked about this last night. So I'd be interested in all of them, what we could do with or not do with.
The short answer to your question is that it does require a little bit more analysis and digging as to the restrictions around some of the funding, and some of them are older than others. But certainly those do remain viable options as far as what they're allowed to be used for. I think that my recollection in my former life with the cannabis funding that came down the pipe, it was more for education and for signage changes and things like that municipalities were having to deal with as a result of and even policy changes as a result of legalizing the substance. So it depends, and I think unfortunately, and this is part of the reason why I'm stumbling a little bit, is that I haven't been able to do all of that background work to bring something more thorough to council and committee at this point. It is on my radar to do that. But so, like I said, I would say out of that entire special projects reserve fund, I would say like 80% or more of it is governed by specific purpose. The remainder we can reallocate at a later date if we so choose. So.
Thank you.
Okay.
On to item 4.3, insurance renewal. Carmen, if you want to do a quick review of that, please.
For sure. I was hoping to have a little bit more depth than I had available to do this report, but it was just to kind of highlight for council and committee as we go through our budget process that this is something that is on sort of my say job description, for lack of a better word, to ensure that our risk management processes and the cost for our risk management is contained to the best of our ability. So this, the insurance increase that we experienced in 2022 was a bit of a surprise to me, given the conversations we had with our insurer. So this is just to provide a little bit more background as far as how the RFP works, how we renew it, and what our process is and how we assess, looking at those increases as they come. So it's to give everyone a little bit of assurance that staff are really recognizing this as a challenging area to manage, and one that is difficult for us to predict or plan for going forward. So I tried to highlight in the report some of the bigger changes. Cyber insurance is one that changes fairly or has been changing the last number of years as the industry, the insurance industry around cyber and the cyber activities that municipalities and companies undertake to protect themselves evolve very quickly. Some of the other areas that have changed as well include our general liability and our automobile and property. So those are just, again, I was just trying to highlight for council that they're some of the factors that influence our premiums and sort of identify if there are any areas of question. We have seen our premiums go up over the last, I'll say 5 or 6 years by probably about 20%, including a 20% increase in 2022 alone. So but anyways, it's more for an information report. It's not really, I'm not really looking for a whole lot of direction at this point. It's just to try to answer any questions that potentially people might have had around insurance.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Clifford?
Carmen, I was going to ask, like, we've had PFL since 2019, and obviously because of what you discussed. But have we asked any other, like a Cowan again, or are we happy with what we got? I think we've done it in the past. We periodically asked other people for quotes, and I just wondered if we're not doing it now, are we planning it for 2023?
To answer your question, thanks for the question and through the chair. When I did consider it when I first arrived, sort of in September, but there wasn't a whole lot of time to issue this because it does take several months to go through the process. However, that said, back in 2019, it looks like we did do a 9-year renewal, which is an unusually long period of time to award an RFP without a whole lot of review, but we are doing that review annually when we look at the renewal. So if we did, again, the timing of it becomes a little bit uncertain when we start to renew, when we start to get the renewal discussions in September, October, November, we don't have enough time to go out to renew it for the upcoming year. So I'm satisfied in reviewing the terms of the BFL proposal and with BFL and with our broker, Rick Orr, that the increases that we experienced in 2022 are industry-wide, and our peers are seeing actually much more significant increases than what we're seeing, particularly around the areas of cyber insurance. A lot of our neighboring municipalities can't get cyber insurance. They don't have appropriate or sufficient controls in place and, you know, appropriate procedures and that sort of thing. So we actually got a gold star from BFL on our cyber processes. So I'm happy to report that. It didn't mean that our premiums didn't go up, but they did recognize that many other municipalities don't even qualify for it. And so, yeah, so to answer your question, I'm taking a little bit of a long way to get there, but it is something I want to look at in 2022, whether it makes sense to go out again for an RFP. It's a very labor intensive process. I will tell you though, in 2019 or 2017, when we changed providers, 2019, I guess it was, Cowan didn't bid on our proposal at that point. So we didn't have that option of that selection. We did have I think another proponent that put their proposal in, but I think it was we didn't have that option. So we wouldn't necessarily limit it to just those 2 or 3 that we know of. We would go out on a full proposal basis and see what we could get out there.
Dr. Ritzman.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for this information. And you might not be able to answer that, but perhaps you can bring it back at some point. I know in the report it identified the concerns around aged fuel tanks, and I have 2 questions. One, what's the definition of an aged fuel tank, and do we have any that we should be concerned about at this point?
Through the chair, thank you very much for that question. You will hear about this again when we get into our budget conversations, but we have aged refers to 25 years or older based on the way the insurance companies navigate age. Okay. We do still, even for our older tanks, we still get them safetied every year. We go through the appropriate things to ensure that we're not having any leaching or other risks that exist with aging, anything aging. But that said, we've received information from our insurer that even obtaining insurance for tanks that are that old is getting harder and harder to do. In 2022, they were able to outsource to a different insurance company, not BFL, the ability for us to get those covered. But we started this process and this conversation back in the fall with, I started it when I arrived at Stratford with the departments to say that we need to start doing this and investigating the process for replacement. We have 6 of them, including the airport, transit, and I think there are a couple of other locations that I, off the top of my head, can't say, but if that helps any.
And they're all in the budget for this year.
Yes.
Or 2022.
Yeah. So one of the challenges it remained in 2021. I was hoping that we could initiate this in 2021, but the lead time for the construction and the design and the insurance, like, getting them properly placed and, making sure that the specifications set takes 6 to 8 months. So we're looking at it being late in 2022 as it is. So I'm still optimistic that we'll be able to address that within 2022 so that we can eliminate part of the premium increase, because we did have to pay extra to get those insured in 2022, and bring our management of that risk back in line.
So there wouldn't be any, it probably wouldn't go anyplace if at some point during the budget process here, I said, can we put some of those off until January 2023? Well, you know the reasons why.
From a timing perspective, Mr. Chair, that's a possibility that they'll straggle into the upcoming year. And we've got them pretty much, I would say most of them are being funded from existing reserves anyway. They're not the I'll say the culprits for where our tax levy pressures are coming from. But that said, we can certainly discuss that further when we get to the budget conversations.
Yeah, if we're getting down to the short strokes here, community services tank replacements at both the cemetery and someplace else are on the tax levy. So those would be the ones I'd be have a closer eye on. So thanks, Council Clifford.
Yeah, I don't know if you can answer. Are all these underground tanks and the tanks we're replacing, are they all above ground, or I'm just curious. I've heard a lot about them, but I'm just not certain what we have now and what we're doing in the future.
You're on mute, Carmen.
Sorry about that. Another excellent question. I can answer part of that. And again, I'll defer to the departmental specific ones, but the staff are exploring either option for most locations. We are limited to underground though at the airport. Just that's what I can qualify that statement with. But again, I think the departments can speak more accurately to their specific limitations or abilities to consider both options.
Councillor Bunting.
Yes, I may have missed this, but do we have any indication as to what portion of this substantial increase is attributed to these tanks and so on and so forth? Do we have any idea?
Thank you, through the chair. I just got the invoice breakdown, so I can answer that. It's around $20,000 of the increase.
In totality for all tanks?
Yes. So and I was going to say that that's the cost of the additional policy that we were required to purchase. That said, we do carry an environmental liability policy that I would say I would describe that as being regardless of the tanks or not, and that I am not including that in my figures.
Thank you.
Yes, and to provide a little more information on Councillor Clifford's question, I don't think the ministry, except maybe at airports and other environments like that, I don't think the Ministry of the Environment lets you bury them anymore. You put them in a concrete, they sit in a concrete tank that has the capacity to hold anything that leaks out of your gas or oil tanks anymore. So that may be, I think, because I think at the bus station a few years ago, they put in new pet tanks, and I seem to recall that this was the requirement that they all have to go above ground now. so that the problem isn't hidden from wondering eyes. Okay, if there's no other questions, I'll look for a member, Councillor Bunting. If there's nothing else, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Thanks, Carmen. Item 5, advisory committees, outside board minutes. We have Stratfords of the World Committee minutes attached. Maybe I can ask the question while we're thinking of it. Is Stratford, and I'm looking to Councillor Clifford, is Stratfords of the World still having their, are they still going to try and have their event this year? Or?
It's a great question. We got together in December, and with the variant coming on so strong, we put it off until the end of, in January. We're in a couple of weeks, or actually I have to look at the date. We are going to decide if we are going to have it one way or the other. But right now, I don't know how, like, we have Australia, New Zealand, Britain, Connecticut, and PEI, and all of these places are, the COVID's crazy. So I can't answer it, but we are going to decide one way or the other in the end of January, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thanks. Item 6, next subcommittee meeting, Tuesday, February 22nd at 3:30 p.m. Item 7, adjournment. Councillor Beatty. All those in favor? That's carried. Thanks, everybody. Stay safe.